If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth, and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at FitnessMama, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Today's episode, I'm chatting to Beth Ryan about how to bring on labour naturally. So 5 natural ways to induce labour. And this is actually a rerun from, I think it's a second ever podcast episode back in October 2020. So it's nearly 3 years old. So I thought we'd do a rerun because it has been a really popular episode. So with Beth today, she's a world of knowledge. We talk about 5 natural ways to induce labour. And then Beth also runs through 5 ways to help set up the birth space to make it a beautiful environment. Because there's so many benefits to helping to set up the birthway in a way that works for you. So you're going to love this episode. We're talking about, actually, I won't give it away because it's the 5 ways to naturally induce labour. You're going to love it. Before we do dive in, I'd love to invite you to come and join us inside Fitness Mama. If you are keen to help prepare your body for birth, or if you're keen to reclaim your pelvic floor and core and strength safely after birth, then you're going to love Fitness Mama. Perhaps you've found you're not exercising as much as you'd like to during or after birth. Perhaps you're busy, you've lost motivation, or you're just not sure about the best exercises to really help to restore your core and to restore your body. Or perhaps you've got pelvic girdle pain or abdominal muscle separation and you're really keen to get the best exercises to help support your body. Or finally, if you want to get back into running after birth or CrossFit or the gym and you want the best kickstarter possible, then Fitness Mama is for you. So join us for these convenient, short, easy, quality workouts that you can do from the comfort of your home whilst your bubba kicks around next to you, whilst your toddler runs around, or at the end of a long day at work. There's a free 7-day trial. Just head to fitnessmama.com and the link is in the show notes. Right, let's dive into this episode. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This is so nice. I'm currently in lockdown, so this is a beautiful way to spend my morning.
Okay, so we're going to be discussing a really exciting topic, one that I know is a bit daunting and scary to a lot of people. We're going to discuss induction, and it's really great. We're going to talk about 5 ways to help with induction naturally, and then 5 ways to help set up the birth space to make it a birth environment when you're in hospital being induced. Before we get started, I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal journey. What made you become a midwife?
I didn't originally come out of school and study mid. I went and did a Bachelor of Arts, like so many people who just really didn't know what they wanted to do. And I went on to study mid, and I absolutely love it. And I think ultimately what makes me so passionate about it is working with women. So there is kind of like that myth out there that, you know, midwives, we sit in a nursery and snuggle babies and bottle feed babies, and it couldn't be further from the truth. I think we first and foremost are kind of for women and try to make the significant but challenging experience of pregnancy, labour and birth as positive as it can be. And that's, I just love it.
Yeah, it's amazing how life takes you on a journey, isn't it? And you start off thinking you're going to study one thing and you end up studying something totally different. I never thought I'd be a pelvic floor physio.
When I told my family, years ago, oh, I think I might do midwifery, they thought I was joking. And it wasn't until I was enrolled and ready to start that they were like, oh, okay, we're doing this. I didn't realise this is so far from where you started.
That's great. So let's get on to today's topic about some ways to help with induction naturally. So I assume this is when you're nearing the end of your pregnancy and you're ready to help to get things moving along. What are some ways that are common to help it all along?
Yeah, so there's so many kind of things out there that we can try. And I think first and foremost, we need to point out that babies will arrive when they're ready. So there's a lot of things that are suggested and we can't guarantee that any of them will work. But, there are some tools that we can do. Lots of people kind of say that sex has something to do with bringing on natural labour and the research kind of indicates that there's probably a few reasons why that is. So semen, lots of women look at me like I'm crazy when I suggest, you're 39 weeks pregnant, have sex. They're like, Beth, I couldn't feel like anything further.
That's right. The last thing you might feel like doing.
Yeah, very happy to acknowledge that off the bat. But we know that semen contains prostaglandins. So prostaglandin is a hormone that works on the cervix to ripen it. And when we talk about ripening the cervix, this is a term you might, if you're listening to this and you have been induced or you might be induced in the future, the concept of ripening the cervix kind of refers to when you haven't given birth before, your cervix is quite firm and long. And then when it starts to soften, it starts to open. And this is the process of ripening or cervical ripening. So hopefully that clears that up. But that's one way that sex can impact bringing on labour. The other theory is that, oxytocin is another hormone that's really, really important when it comes to labour and birth and contractions. And oxytocin is the love hormone. And when you're being intimate with someone that you feel close to or when you orgasm, these are all natural ways to increase your oxytocin. So there's kind of that double mechanism there, I guess, as to why sex might be a good idea. The other evidence-based strategy, and when I say evidence-based, we know that, the studies around these kind of interventions are pretty small, but they are there, is the consumption of dates, so the fruit dates. There was a study that showed women who consume 6 dates a day from 36 weeks gestation were less likely to need induction of labour and more likely to have a ripened cervix and to labour spontaneously, which is super, super cool because it's a really easy thing that we can do
I wish I'd known about that for my first child 7.5 years ago. That's amazing. What is it in dates? Did they find what chemical it was?
I'm sure they did. I haven't delved that deep, but it basically just found that women who had a high concentration of dates in their diet were more likely to have higher Bishop scores, which is a score that midwives use to basically score the ripeness of your cervix, in short. Yeah, super interesting.
I thought pineapple was one as well. Pineapple is another food. Is that right?
So pineapple has been shown in studies with rats to change the tone of the uterus and bring on uterine contractions. But what they found is that that's only when the pineapple, because it's an active ingredient, when the pineapple is placed directly onto the uterus, the uterine muscle and the uterine tissue. And so they found that, with consumption, that impact was kind of lessened because the process of digesting your food and things like that didn't really have an impact. But at the same time, I think, that hasn't been studied in depth and it's been shown to not be harmful. So again, we can add it to the list. We can chuck it in there. It's not going to do any harm. If you're 39 weeks pregnant, you can go and chop yourself up a big pineapple and see how you go. The other one that, you've probably heard of is raspberry leaf consumption. And this one, again, very sort of patchy evidence, but there is some studies to suggest that it increases uterine tone and increases the way in which your uterus can contract and therefore, bring on labour spontaneously. And again, the studies don't show any increased risk of harm for you or your baby. So this is something that midwives do say, you know, from sort of 37 weeks, once you're full term and once you've got clearance from your care provider that you're low risk and that it's okay for you to go into labour, this is definitely a tool that you can introduce. And it's quite delicious to drink. Lots of people have it in a tea form. Other people get, ground up tablets or capsules, I should say, from a naturopath. There's lots of different ways you can do it. And then finally, nipple stimulation and breast stimulation. And this is one that is backed by quite significant evidence and really robust research. And we know that nipple stimulation impacts the way that your uterus contracts. And interestingly, in control trials where a group of women were encouraged to do nipple stimulation, and whether this is using your hands or using a breast pump, and women who did not, the women in the group that did the breast stimulation were more likely to labour naturally, so labour spontaneously. They were more likely to have favourable cervixes, so cervixes that were ripened and thin and soft and ready to open. And there was a decrease in caesarean section rate and a decrease in postpartum hemorrhage. So it's quite significant and it's super interesting. And I think especially from the perspective of, it costs nothing. There's no risk of harm for you or your baby because it's not medical. It's not going to introduce anything that you don't already have.
Okay, so this might sound like a silly question, but let's say you're 40 weeks and you're ready to go and you've had all clearance from your doctor. If you were going to do some nipple stimulation, how long would you recommend it for?
Yeah. So the studies kind of had lots of various times and methods. I would say you probably don't need to do it for any longer than sort of 10 minutes on each side a day would be ample. The same amount of time that you'd maybe encourage women to do the antenatal expressing. So yeah, you definitely don't need to set aside an hour each night and really get in there. It's that's going to get old very quickly. But if you could do 10 minutes in total a day, I think that would be ample. I mean, lots of women probably have heard the sort of castor oil conversation, and lots of people still ask me in clinic, like, my mum told me or my grandma told me or maybe another midwife has said castor oil might be a good idea. And while there is evidence to show that castor oil does induce labour and it can cause uterine activity, we also know that it makes you feel really nauseous. It can cause you to vomit quite a bit. It can cause you to have quite significant diarrhea, which in early labour and active labour can be really, really hard if you're trying to get in your zone and practice those relaxation techniques. If you're feeling really sick, that's not a great thing. For some women, they find that castor oil, it irritates the uterus to a point to have those little niggles and contractions, but it doesn't really put them into really good solid labour. So again, that's something that has mixed evidence, and I think it's just important to do your reading and have a little bit of a dig and proceed with caution with castor oil.
And then there was walking. Is there walking as well? It's a common one?
Yeah, so I think definitely going for a nice walk and practicing upright. Yeah, basically just, whether you go for a nice long walk with the idea of getting baby down, engaged in the pelvis, putting pressure on your cervix, which also releases prostaglandins, which remember is that hormone that can help us go into labour naturally. And this, if you're feeling a little bit tired and fatigued and the idea of a long walk is just not for you in late pregnancy, a fit ball is an exercise ball. Yeah, I mean, you'd probably know so much more about the use of fit balls.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
God, I love a fit ball in those late pregnancy stages. They're amazing, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think something probably just to point out that I've kind of touched on that these may or may not be effective. But I think of a trap that some women fall into is commencing this at sort of 40 weeks when it's Friday and you're booked for your induction on Monday, and what can I do in the next 48 hours? We need to acknowledge that a lot of these suggest that it's good to start from sort of that 37, 36 week mark as a way of preparing your body to start to think about, getting ready to go into labour, rather than going on a crash course of, oh my gosh, I'm booked for my induction. I just want this baby out. I'm going to go for a 2-hour walk, eat 3 date smoothies and hope for the best.
That would have been me. Totally me all over.
Yeah.
That's good to know. That's a great tip. So don't expect magic straight away.
Yes. Yeah.
Lovely. That's awesome. I love those easy, simple techniques that can't do any harm. So Why not give it a go?
Absolutely.
Today's episode is brought to you by Baby Jogger, making parents' lives easier. For active families, Baby Jogger will be your go-to. Their strollers are designed with your comfort and convenience in mind, allowing you to embrace the joys of parenthood while staying active. With Baby Jogger's well-known quick fold technology, you can effortlessly fold your stroller with just one hand, making it a breeze to store and transport. We know that every family has different needs, and Baby Jogger has you covered. They offer a wide range of lightweight, compact options from single to double strollers to all-terrain models. No matter your lifestyle, you'll find the perfect fit. Whether you're navigating through busy streets or tackling rough terrains, their strollers provide a smooth and enjoyable ride for both you and your little ones. And let's not forget about growing families. Whether you're expecting another child or planning for the future, Baby Jogger is there every step of the way. To learn more about their incredible strollers and find the perfect fit for your family, visit their website today on babyjogger.com.au and use the code FIT20, that's FIT20, for 20% off any full-priced product from Baby Jogger. Well, let's move into the next stage. So let's say you are being induced and you've gone into hospital. What are 5 ways to set your birth space up to help make it a positive environment? Because I know being induced can have that perhaps extra element of the unknown about it all and perhaps a bit more anxiety. Like you'd probably come across this more, but yeah, this is a great topic.
Yeah, I think you've just nailed it. Like I think, sometimes people have these wonderful birth plans and they've done so much preparation and when they get induced, they feel like those strategies aren't valid anymore, which I think, or that because it's, become somewhat medical, they can't have the positive environment that they had so hoped for. And this just isn't the case. So we need to remember that, an induction of labour aims to, as gently as we can, mimic the trajectory of a spontaneous labour. And the key difference is that it will be taking place in hospital, whereas, early labour, you might have stayed at home. So I guess in terms of setting up a positive environment, I think your headspace is really important as part of that environment, and we need to try to stay as positive and as open as possible. If you have, for whatever reason, gotten to the point where you need an induction, it's really important to still have a lot of faith that this is still something that you can do. This feels really doable. I've got all the tools and strategies within me to get through this. I think one really big thing is to have some patience, both with your body, the process, but also the system. So one of the biggest things I think that derail a positive headspace and a positive environment is not being properly informed that it may take a couple of days. So lots of people think, oh, I'm booked in for my induction this Friday. Come dinner time on Friday, I'll have my little baby in my arms and it will all be good. But in reality, there's a number of steps that are involved in an induction because, like I said, we're trying to mimic your natural labour, which would usually take a couple of days. And so just have patience. If there's a one step and then you're required to wait a number of hours, don't get impatient with your body. Try to stay in a positive, light headspace and think, okay, this is great. This step is priming, this step is ripening my cervix and getting me ready for the next one.
They're 2 great words to help with that visualization, ripening and priming. I think that's really nice to think of that is happening to your body whilst you're waiting. That's lovely.
Exactly.
I like that.
So even just having that in your mind, okay, great, this step might take a number of hours and I'm waiting for the doctor to come back and it's taking a bit longer than, I would like. That's giving my body extra time to get ready to meet my baby. So that's sort of one big thing. I think having practiced some relaxation techniques, and whether this is sort of some mindfulness and meditation or you've practiced some slow breathing, the reality is with an induction is that there's, did you say urine-induced, Kath?
First one, yes. First child.
You might remember that there's quite a few internal procedures as part of an induction, probably more so than if you laboured spontaneously. So we've got to check what the cervix is doing. We give it that score. We might want to insert some medication inside the vagina and around the cervix. And I think, internal examinations can be quite uncomfortable, both, you don't really want them done, but also they're physically quite uncomfortable. So having some relaxation techniques up your sleeve, being prepared to breathe slowly, have those mindfulness strategies before you go in can help make that experience a lot more positive than being a bit shocked and not having thought, oh, how am I going to get through this? In saying that, most of them are short-lived, but I think it does have an accumulative effect when you're sort of like, oh, another internal or, things like that.
And I think one thing that's good to note, like if you want to do a calm birth or hypnobirthing, that's amazing, but it doesn't need to be a fancy, just because you haven't done a course doesn't mean you can't call upon some good old standard techniques, and just even taking it back to belly breathing and deep breathing. So if you've practiced that beforehand, if you can then tap into that, it doesn't need to be fancy. Like, of course, it's amazing if you can go and do a course where you can learn all about relaxation techniques, but just because you haven't done a course doesn't mean there's not something for you.
I couldn't agree more. And it could literally be, a few weeks out from becoming term, you've researched a couple of apps, free apps that have some meditation tracks that really resonate with you, and that you just pop them in your ears each night and you practice with your partner, just going into a quiet place, taking some deep breaths. Those kind of tools and strategies, and having something to call on, like you said, can make the world of difference to a process that feels quite foreign and a little bit scary, like you said, because it is a little bit different. I couldn't agree more.
With my poor members in the membership, whenever we do squats and we do a squat hold, when it starts to get to that burning, uncomfortable feeling, that's when I really try to encourage that deep breathing. Let's breathe with this burning pain and let's breathe through it and sort of ride that wave, and trying to cue into that mindfulness with all our squats. I like that.
Yeah.
So that's an extra excuse to do another squat hold.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so I guess one of the other things that I suggest to families that I'm looking after who are having an induction is if there's opportunities for rest, take them. So you might find that one of the steps is, a medication that needs to be left in the vagina for 12 hours, and that's a perfect time, particularly if it's overnight and they say to you, do you want a heat pack, and do you want a little bit of simple pain relief, and do you want to hop into bed? It's really tempting to be like, I want to walk laps of the ward and I want to do everything in my power, but we need to find that balance and give your body time to rest and continue preparing for the day ahead when you will start to have those really strong contractions. So just kind of, if there's opportunities and your care providers are guiding you to take it slow, definitely do that. Dim the lights, hop into bed with a heat pack, and try to catch some rest where you can. The following step, I'm kind of stepping you through now, but the following step after that medication is usually that we need to try to break your waters. And this is to make sure that it's safe to give you the oxytocin drip, which will in turn bring your contractions on. And I think, again, calling on those relaxation techniques during that procedure, I guess, is so important, because it's a lot more effective and a lot quicker if you can learn to relax your pelvic floor. So, Kath, you probably can speak to this a lot better than I can, but when we try to do anything internal and we have a really, really tense pelvic floor, and that can happen when we're feeling stressed or anxious or just a little bit unsure, things are a lot harder physiologically.
Absolutely.
Harder.
And being able to relax your pelvic floor when you're already in discomfort or a bit stressed or anxious, if you don't know how to relax your pelvic floor, it's going to be pretty much impossible or very tricky to relax when you're in that state. Whereas if during your pregnancy or before you're pregnant, you've really learned how to relax your pelvic floor and get the muscles stronger. So it's not just about relaxing. We want to get that balance of strengthening exercises, but also the relaxation. If you can really become aware and familiar with your pelvic floor and the tone, that's awesome, because then when you're in that moment of stress or discomfort, you can tap into those. It's like what we talked about with the deep breathing techniques and that relaxation. You can tap into that much easier.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you've got your induction booked, you might find that you find it harder to relax your pelvic floor with all the lights on. So for this step, when we're trying to break your waters, we can use a torch if we need some light, but we don't necessarily need to have the big hospital lights on over you while you lie flat on your back, because that is going to interrupt our natural ability to relax anyway. So if you're finding that you're having a hard time relaxing your pelvic floor, or that these kind of internal procedures are really incredibly uncomfortable for you, one strategy that's so simple can just be to say, hi, can we turn off the lights, please? Or can we at least dim the light? Or can I turn a lamp on instead of having these bright lights where I feel really observed? Because that's not going to do you any favors for your ability to relax your pelvic floor. So that's a really simple strategy that you can use in the context of induction to help you on your way, so that we can get through these steps that will help you to get into labour yourself. I think once your waters have broken, most hospitals have the next step in their process, I guess, is to put up that oxytocin drip. And I think everybody responds differently, but certainly there can come a point with an oxytocin infusion where suddenly your body starts to respond to the hormones that we've been giving you through the drip, and this can manifest in quite strong, quick contractions. So for that reason, a lot of women are keen to avoid it. And look, in some cases, it's what we need to have a baby. And in many, many cases, it's what helps us achieve a natural birth or a vaginal birth. But there's also an argument for, provided that you're okay and that your baby's okay and that there's not a huge rush to give birth, there's also an argument for saying to your care provider, look, do you mind if I have 2 hours after my waters have broken to see if that's enough to get me into labour? This is where we can utilise some other strategies, such as that dark room, such as that nipple stimulation, such as trying to nourish our own natural oxytocin to kind of work with that step of the induction and maybe not even need the third step. This is going to be case by case, and certainly if your care provider is expressing concern that they don't think it's suitable to wait, then you need to take that on. But I think it's important to know that you have agency to say, hey, look, do you mind after you've broken my waters if I can walk around the hospital for a couple of hours, get my baby down into the pelvis, do some nipple stimulation, sit in a dark room with my partner and have a cuddle, have a kiss and think, oh, yay, I'm going to get my natural oxytocin going. These are all things that you can do to then, if you do need the drip in the end, that's okay. You've given it a shot. At least you know you've been given time and that you've been able to kind of advocate for some time. And yeah, so that's something that you can do definitely. And then finally, when we're in full swing and we've got, it's come time that we need to put up the oxytocin drip, this is sort of the final step of an induction. The purpose of the oxytocin drip is to give you enough oxytocin that will mimic a natural labour pattern. So in terms of an induction, it's super important that we treat the space exactly like we would if you had laboured spontaneously at home. So by this I mean, keeping the privacy. This will help your natural oxytocin to boost, and you'll start to work with your body rather than against the process. We know that dim lighting and private space and not feeling observed nourishes your body's ability to go into labour and to labour effectively. And this is something that we should honour even in the context of an induction. It doesn't matter that we're getting oxytocin through the drip. We still need to make sure that you feel calm and that you feel safe and that you don't feel watched. And this can be as simple as, like I said, turning off the lights, bringing with you some of those fantastic LED candles that you can pick up at $2 shops. They're wonderful for giving off a soft light and not those horrible bright lights that we've installed in every hospital. And then, you can still make the space yours. So whether this is bringing in a pillow from home, that kind of sensory, something that smells like home or looks like home, all of those things can bring down your cortisol levels, reduce your stress, make sure that your body knows and your mind knows that you're in a safe environment. And these things sound really funny. Like when I talk to women in clinic, they kind of look at me like, Beth, how's a pillow or, a dim light going to make any difference? But at the end of the day, we're animals. And if we think about any other mammal, do they wander into a busy street to give birth to think about a dog, puppies? No, they go find the darkest cupboard in the house when no one's going to look at them, no one's going to bother them. And that is where their body feels safe to welcome a baby. And we're the same. So even if you're having an induction, you don't need to think that you don't get to enjoy all of these natural things. You absolutely can. We're just helping your body on its way, and we can still do all of these things to kind of nourish the process.
Love it. So that was 5. You talked about patience, having patience in the process. Discussed the relaxation techniques that can be super useful.
Yeah.
The ability to rest and let time take its own course.
Yeah.
And then supporting your own oxytocin production. So that was 5 lovely ways to help set up the birth space.
Yeah. I hope those tips are helpful.
No, absolutely. It's I wish I had a chat to you before the birth of my first child. And also all those tips that you've discussed, they are useful whatever pain relief you choose to have as well.
Exactly right.
I think those tips are all transferable whether or not you have no medications or you have the epidural.
Yes, 100%. I think we need to sort of get better at realizing that it doesn't have to be all natural or all medical. There's things that it doesn't matter if you have an induction and an epidural and you need, quite a bit of help meeting your baby. You can still set up your space so that it feels comforting, safe and calm, because it will help you have a more positive experience.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Beth. And that was just one topic out of a million we could have chatted about. So we'll have to have you again on the podcast soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Kath.
And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links, including how to join our free 7-day trial at fitnessmama.com/podcast. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me very soon for another episode of the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at FitnessMama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.